found yourself searching for your keys, only to realize you put them in a strange place? Or struggled to recall the name of that actor from your all-time favorite movie? Of course you have. We all do it. But what if I told you that some of these seemingly normal memory slips could actually be the first subtle signs of something far more serious? Today, we're going to talk about 10 early warning signs of Alzheimer's disease, signs that many of us often dismiss as simply tiredness or just a part of getting older. And one of these signs is so incredibly subtle, it might completely take you by surprise. All right, let's talk about the first sign. And it's the one everyone's heard of, memory loss. But let's be clear from the start, forgetting where you put the TV remote. And that's not Alzheimer's. That's just life, isn't it? But forgetting how to use that remote, now, that's a different kettle of fish entirely. The key word here isn't loss, but impact. We're talking about memory lapses that genuinely start to disrupt daily life. For instance, someone might have just spoken to you on the phone. Then 5 minutes later, they call back asking the exact same questions because the conversation has simply vanished from their mind. This isn't just occasional forgetfulness, it's a systematic erasure of recent information. They might forget important dates, birthdays of loved ones, or events that happened just a day ago. It's a bit like a computer where the save function is broken. Everything that happens only stays in its short-term memory and disappears with the very next reboot. And the most insidious thing is that at this stage, the person might still try to mask it. They might make light of it, use notes, or rely on family members for help. We in turn see this and think, oh well, anyone can have a senior moment, or they're just tired. Let's be honest, it's far easier to put it all down to stress than to suspect something more serious, isn't it? But it's precisely this overlooking, this ignoring, that allows the illness to quietly progress. And yet, there are signs that aren't connected to memory at all, and those can be even more telling. And here's another telltale sign, often dismissed as simple absent-mindedness, or just being tired, difficulty with planning and problem-solving. Cast your mind back to your favourite recipe, the one you know so well you could make it in your sleep. Now imagine looking at it, and suddenly it's all Greek to you. You don't understand the sequence, how much of each ingredient to add, and the whole idea of cooking just fills you with panic. Or take something like managing your monthly budget and paying bills. What used to be a simple routine, taking maybe 15 minutes, now stretches into hours and leaves you feeling utterly despairing. It's not that the person has suddenly forgotten how to count or has simply become lazy. The problem runs much deeper than that. The ability to concentrate and hold a sequence of actions in your mind begins to slip away. The brain can no longer construct a simple plan. First I'll do this, then that, and finally, this. It's as if your internal GPS has gone haywire and can no longer plot a route from A to B, even if that journey is ridiculously simple. And this feeling of utter hopelessness when faced with even the simplest task, that's a very worrying sign that truly shouldn't be ignored. Our third point touches on difficulties with everyday, well-known tasks. This is where the line between simply being a bit overwhelmed or tired and needing to pay closer attention becomes very fine indeed. Imagine driving to work your entire life along the same route, only to suddenly realise one morning that you're unsure where to turn at the next junction. Or when a mother, famous for baking the most delicious pies, suddenly can't recall how to turn on her own oven. We're not talking about forgetting how to perform a complex task. Instead, it's about fundamental automatic skills. For instance, someone might suddenly forget the rules of their favourite board game, one they've played every Saturday for the past 20 years, or struggle to understand how to use the TV remote they've operated for years. This isn't merely a lapse in memory, it's more like a crucial instruction manual has been suddenly erased or cut out of the brain. And the most distressing part is that the individual experiencing this feels incredibly confused and vulnerable. They instinctively know they should know how to do it, but simply cannot access that information within their own mind. This often leads to feelings of shame and a strong desire to conceal their struggles, which unfortunately makes early diagnosis even more challenging. Now let's move on to the fourth sign, and this one can be genuinely unsettling. It's disorientation in time and space. Let's face it, who hasn't woken up on occasion, especially after a long weekend, and taken a moment to figure out what day it is? But that's not the kind of disorientation we're discussing. We're talking about something on a vastly different scale. Imagine losing not just track of days, but entire seasons. Someone might get ready for the beach in December, genuinely bewildered by the snow outside. They lose their sense of time's passage. For them, events that happened just 5 minutes ago might feel like yesterday, while something that occurred a year ago could seem like it happened today. Time ceases to be an orderly progression for them. Instead, it becomes a chaotic jumble of moments. But even more terrifying is the loss of spatial orientation, and we're not talking about getting lost in an unfamiliar city. We're talking about getting lost on your own street. Imagine walking to a shop just 5 minutes away, only to stop halfway, completely bewildered, not knowing where you are or, crucially, how to get back home. It's as if your internal GPS navigator suddenly shut down forever, leaving you stranded in a world that was once familiar but has now become utterly alien. Now, the fifth sign is one of the trickiest to spot because it's so easy to mistake it for just getting older and needing stronger glasses. We're talking about difficulties with visual perception and understanding spatial relationships. And no, I'm not talking about simply needing stronger glasses. This is about how the brain interprets what your eyes are seeing. For instance, reading might become a struggle, not because the letters are blurry, but because the brain can't quite piece them together into words. Or they might struggle to judge distances, perhaps spilling tea because they keep putting the cup down next to the table instead of on it. They might also find it hard to distinguish between similar colours or shades, something that was never a problem before. But sometimes it shows up in really odd ways. Someone might walk past a mirror and not recognise their own reflection, not because they've forgotten what they look like, but because the brain can't quite connect the image in the mirror with their internal sense of self. Or, for example, they might find it difficult to sit down on a chair, simply because they can't accurately judge its height or how far away it is. It's like looking at the world through a funhouse mirror, where all the proportions and distances seem distorted. This isn't a problem with your eyes themselves. It's a problem with the brain's picture processing centre, and this kind of glitch in the system is a very serious cause for concern. Right then, our sixth point, and it's all about what makes us social creatures, our ability to speak. But sometimes, new and persistent difficulties with words can start to emerge, and we're not talking about simply forgetting a difficult word or an actor's name, mind you. No, it goes much deeper than that. Someone might start to lose the thread of their own conversation. They might stop mid-sentence and simply fall silent, having completely forgotten what they were talking about. Or perhaps they begin to struggle, searching for even the simplest, most everyday words. Imagine you want to ask for your watch, but the word watch has simply vanished from your mind. Instead, you might say something like, "Could you pass me that, thing on your wrist that tells the time?" This condition is known as anomia. It's as if the dictionary in your mind is starting to develop blank spots. What's more, the ability to understand spoken language can also be affected. It becomes challenging to follow a fast-paced dialogue or keep up in a lively group discussion. They simply can't process the flow of information quickly enough. Their speech might become fragmented or disjointed. They might also repeat the same phrases or words over and over. And these aren't just simple slips of the tongue, you see. No, it's a clear indication that the language processing centres in the brain are starting to malfunction. It's rather like trying to tune an old radio. Instead of clear speech, you only hear snippets of conversation and a lot of static. Our seventh sign is one that could almost make you laugh, if it wasn't quite so deeply unsettling. It's when someone starts consistently putting things in places that simply make no sense. Of course, we've all, in a moment of distraction, perhaps popped our phone in the fridge, but the crucial difference here is this. A healthy individual, upon discovering such a mistake, would be surprised, have a good chuckle, and quickly realise they were just a bit absent-minded. They would then be able to mentally retrace their steps and figure out exactly how it happened. However, person in the early stages of Alzheimer's doesn't just misplace an item, they actually lose the ability to find it again. They cannot reconstruct their actions to understand where they might have left the missing object. To them, finding the TV remote in the sugar bowl won't seem strange at all. What's more, they might even start accusing others of having moved their belongings or worse, stolen them. This is because, in their perception of the world, they did everything correctly, and the missing item is the result of someone else's ill will. This breakdown in the logical connection between an action and its outcome is a very telling symptom. Their world ceases to be orderly, and they begin to search for external explanations for what's happening, rather than attributing it to their own actions. A critical concern, and one of the most perilous both for the individual and their loved ones, is a decline in self-awareness and sound judgment. This often leads to impulsive and, at times, catastrophic decisions. The brain loses its ability to accurately assess situations and understand the true consequences of its actions. It's akin to a ship's captain who no longer spots icebergs in their path. What does this mean in practical terms? Someone who has been frugal and sensible their entire life might suddenly hand over all their savings to phone scammers, simply because an elaborate story seems completely plausible. Or they might begin purchasing vast quantities of utterly unnecessary items, merely acting on a fleeting impulse. However, this doesn't just apply to finances. This impaired judgment also manifests in everyday routines. A person might neglect personal hygiene, failing to shower, wearing dirty clothes, without genuinely understanding why this is an issue. They might even venture out in freezing weather wearing summer clothes, unable to properly gauge the temperature. The most challenging aspect, however, is that they remain absolutely convinced they are in the right. Any attempts to point out the illogicality or potential danger of their actions will be met with strong resistance, often hostility. They effectively lose their inner guardrails, the crucial mechanism responsible for personal safety and sound judgment. The ninth sign is often the most noticeable from an outside perspective, and it can be particularly heartbreaking for family and friends to witness. It manifests as a gradual withdrawal from social life and a giving up of cherished activities and hobbies. A person who once eagerly met friends, enjoyed a game of chess, or spent hours gardening, might suddenly lose all interest in these very pursuits. This isn't simply a case of laziness or a passing bad mood. The underlying reasons run much deeper. Firstly, holding a conversation becomes genuinely challenging. As we've discussed, they may struggle to find the right words or keep up with the flow of conversation, leading to immense strain and embarrassment. It often feels easier to avoid social interaction altogether than to constantly face that feeling of unease or awkwardness. Secondly, beloved hobbies that once brought immense joy now become a source of profound frustration. It's hard to find pleasure in knitting when you constantly forget the pattern, or to enjoy playing the guitar when you can no longer recall the chords. The brain simply isn't able to cope with tasks that demand sustained concentration and sequential thought. Consequently, individuals begin to avoid anything that highlights their growing difficulties. They withdraw into themselves, preferring passive pastimes like simply sitting and staring blankly into space. This is a natural psychological defense mechanism, an attempt to retreat from a world that has become overwhelmingly complex and unfamiliar. And so we arrive at the 10th indicator, arguably the most subtle and certainly the most emotionally taxing. These are noticeable shifts in mood and personality. Someone you've known your entire life might suddenly begin to behave quite differently. A person who was once kind and placid by nature may become suspicious, easily offended, and even aggressive. Imagine for a moment living in a world that seems to be constantly deceiving you. Belongings go missing, people utter things that make no sense, and even familiar surroundings begin to feel alien. A natural human reaction to such utter chaos would undoubtedly be fear and deep anxiety. They might start to suspect their closest loved ones of wanting to harm them, steal from them, or even defraud them. They might easily burst into tears over the most trivial matter, or, conversely, display complete indifference to truly significant events. Their mood can shift with astonishing rapidity, often for no discernible reason whatsoever. One moment they may be laughing heartily, and the very next they could be profoundly withdrawn or intensely irritated. They might become profoundly disoriented, particularly when in unfamiliar surroundings. These profound changes are not, in fact, a mere case of a sour temper or a spoiled disposition. They are rather the direct consequence of chemical and structural alterations occurring within the brain itself. This is, in essence, a desperate plea for help from someone who is steadily losing command over their own emotions and is struggling to comprehend not only the world around them, but also their very self. But the most striking, and indeed rather unsettling thing about all of this isn't necessarily the loss of past memories. No, the most subtle and insidious early warning sign, one that often goes unnoticed, is a gradual decline in interest in the future. It's when someone stops making plans, when the simple suggestion of, "How about next weekend?" is met with nothing but indifference. This isn't just plain laziness, nor is it clinical depression in its typical form. It's that crucial moment when the brain simply stops seeing any sort of future prospect. And that, I'd venture to say, is perhaps even more frightening than forgetting yesterday. It means, effectively, forgetting that there will be a tomorrow. Now, these 10 signs aren't just isolated little glitches, you see. Think of them more as pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. On their own, each might seem rather insignificant, but when you start putting them all together, a truly worrying picture begins to emerge. Early diagnosis won't magically cure the illness, of course. However, what it does provide is the most precious thing you can have in this situation. Time. Time to prepare yourselves, to potentially slow down the progression of symptoms, and to ensure you live out your remaining years with the best possible quality of life. Thank you ever so much for staying with us and watching this important video right to the very end. If you found any of this information new or indeed helpful, please do give us a like and consider subscribing to the channel. Your continued support truly helps us to keep creating more valuable content like this. And now, we'd love to hear from you. Have you or your loved ones perhaps noticed any of these less obvious signs in yourselves or others? Do share your experiences in the comments section below, as your insights could truly help others to recognise and not miss these crucial early signals.